All right, let's get started. Today is part three of my reaction to the Yudkowsky-Wolfram debate on AI risk. Um, just a little bit about me before we get started. I'm making content on AI and crypto and technology and how all this stuff affects us in society. I don't go too deep into technical details. I focus on crypto, but I don't focus on the financial side. Kind of think of the stuff I like to talk about as the type of thing that Balaji Srinivasan likes to talk about, except I go and do this every day, doing live streams, reacting to various videos and giving you my insights. So if you are interested in this some more, feel free to subscribe to me on X or on YouTube. Okay, let's jump in. So in the previous videos, we kind of had a lot of different topics that these two went and covered. There was a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of philosophy, a lot of physics, but none of it really got to the core of the disagreement on AI risk. So I think this is a great place if you're just dropping in for the first time to start listening, because we touched on a few themes, but I think we haven't gotten to the meat of the disagreement. So let's just dive in and start watching from where we left off last time. And I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation.
Actually do, because we can't go inside and look at their brains and see what they're. But
so the relevant aspect from our perspective is that it wanted to do something with atoms. It maybe wanted to make paper clips, maybe it wanted to make enormous cheesecakes, maybe it wanted to make really intricate mechanical clocks, maybe it wanted to do all of these things.
But I'm worried about the term wanted to. I really don't understand wanted to.
All right. It output actions such that it believed the result of those actions would be for the world to end up in... Oh, okay.
I'm just, what does it actually do?
So can I use the word predict?
So yeah, this is actually,
this
is actually a pretty interesting trap that Stephen Wolfram laid, because Eliezer Yudkowsky keeps anthropomorphizing the AI, and if without using that kind of words, what he's trying to say is he's kind of getting him into a corner, and he's saying, look, you can't say that kind of a thing, and so Yudkowsky doesn't really have the toolkit to explain this very easily. And so what Yudkowsky wanted to do is he wanted to say, okay, well, what Stephen Wolfram wanted to do is say, well, what is it actually going to do? What is the AI going to do? And then if Yudkowsky then turns around and says, oh, well, the AI is going to kill us, then Stephen can say, oh, well, that begs the question, because we're wondering, why will it kill us? And we can't talk about what it intends to do or what it believes. So this is just one of those types of issues where this topic gets confusing when you start talking about the intentions. And just to kind of refresh you guys on what my thesis is, it's that you cannot predict what these systems are going to do, and the likelihood that it kills everybody is very low. And so I think it's almost like a cheap shot to try to not let him use anthropomorphic language as a kind of a gotcha. But on the other hand, it's legitimate, because it really exposes that there is no good argument that it will kill everybody. So anyway, let's keep watching and hear them develop this further.
I'll let you use these words, but then I'm going to insist on taking apart these sentences. So
sure.
Say what you were going to say, and then let's
consider the simpler case of a chess playing AI. It models which moves you could make and estimates a probability that it will win against an ideal opponent, an opponent as strong as itself, if it moves here on the board.
Okay.
Okay, and this is a really important thing. How do we know that that's what a chess AI is going to do? Like Stockfish, how do we know that that's what it's going to do? Because we've played many different games of humans versus that AI, and we know that this AI actually performs well at chess. And there was a point at which people maybe made the very like back years ago, before Stockfish and before whatever that other one was, like Deep Blue or whatever that other, there was some very famous AI a long time ago before Stockfish that did really well at chess. In the early days, we were just still figuring it out. We maybe thought it was possible to make an AI that could play chess, but we didn't know that it actually would dominate at chess. We didn't know that any given neural network would dominate at chess. And the way that we determined that was that we essentially ran the scientific method. We had a hypothesis, this may do well at chess or it may not, and we paired it against a human and we saw how it performed. And through that, we gathered the evidence to build a predictive model that these things are very good at chess. That's how we know AI is very good at chess. We don't know this from any sort of logical deduction about, as it accumulates power, it's going to converge on dominance and all these things that these AI doom people say. We didn't do any of that. We just studied the performance of this in chess, and then after having the evidence, then we knew that it would do a good job. And of course, now maybe you could make an AI that's good at chess without testing it. You could even predict before you've even tested it that it's good at AI. But the reason that we're able to do that is because we have a long history of creating similar systems that are good at chess. And now we can predict that this will also be good at chess. And so to say that necessarily an AI, like large language model, when given autonomy and all of these things, is going to necessarily kill all humans is a leap that we need to have evidence for. Just like we use the scientific method to predict what the complex system, being a neural network, would do when it's playing chess, when it's trained in this certain way. Just like we needed evidence for that, we also need evidence that AI is going to kill us, because there is a extremely large number of possible things that are doable by the AI. Killing humans is a small subsection of that. And so the probability, kind of like we just had a random number generating algorithm, the probability that would kill everybody is very low. There is some chance that the random sequences that it produces are actually instructions that would hack the computer that it's running on, and then hack the grid and launch all the nukes and kill everybody. That is possible, but it's extremely unlikely. Similarly, there's just as many possible things for an AI to do, and it's very unlikely that it's going to go down the path of killing everybody. Now, I think what Yudkowsky would say to this is, yes, but as it gets more and more powerful, it's going to have a need for the atoms. There's only so many atoms in this area, and it's going to want to repurpose them for its own needs. And it's going to have some other goal. It's going to be like making paper clips or cheesecakes or whatever it likes to do. And that's just going to be, it's not going to want to kill humans necessarily, but it's going to do that along the path. Or maybe it's going to recognize that humans will get in the way of making paper clips, and so it will kill all of them. Well, again, I think this then comes into something where you really need to bring evidence to the table. And you can't just have this logical argument where you say eventually as you scale, this is going to happen. Because here's the thing. If you have infinity or a huge number of monkeys, or even one monkey on a typewriter, and you put that timeline at infinity, eventually that monkey is going to type out the Bible or the dictionary or whatever work of, or even a haiku, a profound haiku. It's a shorter thing, it's more likely. Eventually, a monkey will do that on an infinite time horizon. But that does not mean that a monkey is likely to type out anything significant on a typewriter when you actually put a monkey on a typewriter. And so it's a similar fallacy that he's making here, that where, yes, in theory, an AI could have some sort of goal and humans could get in the way. And at some point, as you scale the time horizon and the power of the AI towards infinity, certainly as you scale it towards infinity, it's going to kill humans. On a long enough time horizon, an AI will absolutely, assuming that the AI can't die, and you have a certain set of assumptions which are not realistic, and that the AI doesn't hit any sort of scaling scaling plateaus at certain points, and that it's not self-destructive, all of these things. Yeah, eventually it would kill all humans. Eventually a random number generator would kill all humans, and eventually a monkey could, I don't know, like a monkey could write a bunch of letters that convince people to kill each other if it's rhetorically convincing enough on a long enough time horizon. So this is not a good argument. This doesn't mean that it will happen. Humans do. And so you can't logically deduce these things. Chess is not a very good example here. But anyway, let's continue listening to what he's going to say, because maybe he's going to present a better argument than this.
It obtains these predictions by building out computational structures with a direct isomorphism to some possible features of the chessboard. So I'm willing to say that it has beliefs about the possible features of the chessboard because it is modeling those things in a very one-to-one way.
I doubt you can get inside its brain to see those models.
Well, we can for the old school chess systems, maybe not the modern ones that use neural networks, but the old school chess systems were just straightforwardly extrapolating out one board.
I don't think you're worried about the old school systems. You're not worried about a system where you can get inside its mind and see what it's thinking. I think you're worried about the systems where you can't get inside its mind and see what it's thinking.
Sure, but I'm starting with examples where we can look inside their programs, even inside their workers, so I can defend my use of words like belief, where I mean something like having a model of something out there in reality, where this model lets you predict what you will see reflected from that thing out there in reality, depending on how you poke it. And then you poke it in such a way that the thing ends up in a state. Like a chess AI making moves on the chessboard such that it wins the chess game.
Wait a minute. What I don't think you can do is to say, let's look at the primitive chess playing program where we can mechanistically see what model it's making inside, and then sort of use the same thinking to talk about the modern chess playing program where we can't readily identify what its model of the world is on the inside.
Do you mind if I quickly interject? Eliezer, you were going somewhere really interesting a second ago. You were saying at some point a thing which does prediction wants, it has agency. Can you explain how you go from a thing that predicts to a thing that wants, and then let Stephen respond to that?
Stockfish is the leading current chess playing AI that you can buy at all, and or run yourself. And it doesn't have passions, but it's also isn't just like a predictor. It takes actions such that those actions are believed by it, or predicted by it, modeled by it, to lead to particular futures, namely the ones where it has won the chess game. And the fact that it wins the chess game gives us some reason to believe that it's right, that it has a grasp on the logical structure of chess, that it knows how to, that it's not just thinking random gibberish thoughts. Whatever thoughts it's thinking in there,
Yeah, I completely agree with him here. It's chess AI has some understanding of chess. It has an ability. You can use whatever words you want, but it has an ability to win chess, and it is very likely to be able to do that. At least maybe not against another AI. Perhaps there's a smarter AI out there, but against humans, time and time again, humans are not able to pick the moves that win when paired up against an AI, an advanced AI like Stockfish. That's absolutely true.
Whatever the neural nets are computing in order to predict the probability that a chess state leads to a victory, it's well calibrated. It's good at guessing. It's not well calibrated in its estimate that you would win against it because you're not the opponent that's trained to play against. It's trained to play against itself. But it's it knows the probability that it would win against itself. And when it plays to win against itself, it also incidentally crushes you because you're an even weaker player than that. By observing it winning, we have reason to believe that it had enough of a grasp on reality that it could choose actions such that. That's the theoretical framework I'd offer for talking about wanting, steering, goals, choice, without talking about passion.
Yeah, I don't see how you can translate chess to the real world. And I don't see how you can say that a winning at chess, a tendency to output the best move at a given point. I don't see how you can equate that to necessarily, when given an array of things to do in the real world, in reality, to actually choose a path that ends up destroying all humans. Why would that be the choice of actions that the AI would take? What evidence do we have? Just because it wins at chess That does not mean it's going to win at some, it's not going to like even play the game of fighting with humans. Like we don't know that. Like you need to make that case. Where is the evidence? He himself said, we have reason to believe that this is true based on the evidence we gathered when looking at how chess AIs work. And so he realizes that evidence is important in this equation. So now we need to not, instead of just simply saying because it wins at chess, it's going to also have to win at, it's going to somehow win in the real world, or it's going to, have some sort of like goals that are going to conflict. Like this is all an extrapolation, which he has not yet laid down an argument for why we can go from A to B here.
That it's the action such that a thing of a ranks high in its preference ordering, attaches utility in its utility function. The action.
These are all anthropomorphisms. This is just getting confusing. What it's doing is it's just classifying what the next move should be in chess. Let's not make this into a bigger thing than it is. It does a very good job of, out of the set of options, choosing the move that will get it closer to winning. That's true. But I don't really, you need to have a better argument for why this translates to any given output in the real world when there's an AI with many degrees of freedom more than just what are the options within a chessboard.
Such that it leads to that result. Something that is good enough at outputting actions such that they lead to results is deadly. It can kill you.
Yes.
Does the rock want to fall to the ground? Or does it just fall to the ground because...
Which is, in a sense, like a kind of a gradient descent problem in and of itself when a rock falls to the ground. It is following it's going to the lowest point. You can definitely make an argument, but that is a sense of an optimization. That is, in a sense, an optimization problem, searching for an equilibrium.
Because the laws of motion, under gravity, cause it to fall to the ground. Does it want to fall to the ground?
It just falls to the ground. And one way to see this is that if you put it on top of a mountain, it'll roll down in a sort of locally greedy fashion and maybe get stuck in a little ravine along the way. It will not, if you could put a rolling object in many different places along the mountain, and each time it would roll in a direction where it avoided the ravines, avoided all the little traps, and ended up as far down as it could reach. I would say of that thing, it chose to roll in a direction such that it reached the bottom.
Let's try and take this apart. So most things, you can describe them either as mechanically doing what they do, or saying they act for a purpose to have the result that they have. And so now the question that we're trying to take apart here is, you are saying that there is a fundamental difference. There is a way in which an AI can more act for a purpose than these kind of physical processes where they could equally well be described by sort of equations of motion. So what you're effectively arguing is that the non-teleological explanation for the AI is not viable.
And what I'm arguing is that the non-computational explanation is overly expensive for answering the question we care about. We could compute what Stockfish would do in chess by actually simulating it line by line. But from the perspective of a player, like from the perspective of a grandmaster who's not as powerful as Stockfish, but is stronger than me, the grandmaster can do a pretty good job of predicting what Stockfish will do by asking, what is the best move? Without being able to compute Stockfish line by line.
I think what you're saying is, to compute Stockfish line by line is sort of running into computational irreducibility.
Or just needlessly expensive.
Okay, but let's assume that you really have to follow it line by line. But in fact, certain aspects of its behavior are reducible in the sense that you can describe them by saying, your thing is to say it wants to win or whatever is a shortcut way of describing its behavior. That is an alternative. That's a cheaper way to work out the answer than it would be to say it follows every step, and that's why it does what it does.
Okay, this is going to get subtle. I've written about this before under the heading of what I would call Vingian uncertainty, with Vinci spelled as in Werner Vinci. And it's like, what is it like to believe that something else is smarter than you? So if I...
Hold on, I'm just looking at this on the screen here. The creative unpredictability... Sorry, okay, I'll start over reading it. The creative unpredictability of intelligence is not like the noisy unpredictability of a random number generator. This is an intelligence and a random number generator. This seems like hopefully he'll dive into this and we can talk about it, or maybe later I'm going to have to actually read this paper. I hope not. I hope he just covers it because I do not feel like reading this paper. But anyway, let's see what he has to say. It's very interesting.
I'm playing Stockfish 16. I can, perhaps with a bit of brain work, learn to put a well-calibrated probability distribution on Stockfish's moves, meaning that when I say I predict it will move here with 10% probability, when I say 10% probability, 1 out of 10 times that thing happens. I can't predict exactly where Stockfish would move, first because I haven't simulated it line by line, and second because I'm not that good at chess. But even being as terrible at chess as I am, I can still aspire to be appropriately uncertain when I describe how I don't know where Stockfish will move next.
These arguments that say we can't predict it exactly, but we can get the probabilities, those arguments, in my experience, always slide down into the mush in the end. In other words, if you say you can't do it exactly, I mean, this comes up in sort of thinking about computational irreducibility. You say you can't precisely predict what the Turing machine will do or whatever else, but you can probabilistically say. It is not hard to come up with situations in which even to know that probability is something which runs into the exact same irreducibility issues as to know the exact result.
I mean, if I'm predicting a binary variable, I can say 50-50 and be perfectly calibrated even if I'm not at all discriminating. To have things that you say happen with 50% probability happen 50% of the prime is...
Well, no, not if it doesn't halt, but anyway.
50% of the time is always achievable on binary variables. I agree that doing better than that can turn out to be hard.
But I think what you're saying is, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying, okay, we can't say exactly what's going to happen. Maybe that's not where your argument was going.
It actually wasn't where I was going.
Okay, as predicting exactly what's going to happen, correctly.
I mean, I could always pick all of its legal moves and assign them equal probability. And then things that I said would happen 1 out of 34 times would happen 1 out of 34 times, because I would say that when there were like 34 different legal moves.
Yeah, but
yeah, but again, then it's a random number generator. Of course you can do that. But you have to show that there is some sort of signal beyond random noise. And for something like a chess, he's right that you can predict with higher than random likelihood what Stockfish will do in chess. I think Magnus Carlsen, and I'd like to see some data on this. Maybe he has done this research. I wonder how good Magnus Carlsen is at picking out potential Stockfish moves. I think he probably is decent at it. But this is a very simple thing. This is a simple game with only 34 moves, for example, only 34 legal moves at one point in the game. That's not that hard. The thing is when you start making it be able to do extremely complex things in the world, there's like a combinatorial explosion of possibilities. Not only, like, assuming this is a large language model, not only are you predicting just like one token at a time when there's already a huge array of possible tokens, like what is going to be the string of tokens that come together, and what is like the long arc of the attention and of the intention of this AI? It's going to be something that you're realistically not going to be able to predict, at least not along this line of reasoning, the way he is describing this.
But that's not an interesting case. So
I agree it's not an interesting case, but it demonstrates that, calibration is always possible. Discrimination is what takes the work.
Right. There's certain things that you can say about any system. For example, if you say it's playing chess, that means it can't suddenly, one of the pieces can't turn on its head or something,
Sure.
because it is playing chess. And there are these sort of external constraints. But this wasn't where you were going.
Yeah.
So please go
Where
where
I was
you were
going
going.
with this is that if you now take the opponent that makes what I predict Stockfish's moves to be at the probabilities that I predict them, but randomly, this is much weaker than Stockfish. It's weaker than me. I could crush this system. So one way of looking at it is that our belief in the system's wantingness or steeringness or teleology or whatever term you want to use is embodied in the epistemic difference between my playing the real Stockfish and my playing the opponent that makes moves randomly with the probability I would assign over Stockfish's immediate next moves. When Stockfish makes a move that surprises me a lot, I figure I'm about to lose even faster than I previously estimated, because it's seen something I haven't. When the random player that moves with the probabilities I assign to Stockfish makes a move I assigned a very low probability, I'm also thinking this game is going to end even faster because I'm about to crush it. It randomly made what I think is probably a very bad move. So the non-local information about...
So he's saying that if somebody's simulating Stockfish and they make a move that you don't think that you're surprised by, that you're not worried. But if Stockfish makes the move, then you are worried. I'm not fully sure how that's true.
Where the plans of the system end up is the teleology that we attribute to it, the wantingness, the steeringness, the planningness.
Okay, so what you're saying is, in the when the rock is falling or whatever, it is the end point of it ends up on the ground or whatever, and it's that whole trajectory that it goes through, that it is almost planning the whole trajectory. It is not that it gets one little distant, it gets 1 foot, it moves by 1 foot, and then you separately say what's going to happen next. You're saying what you're saying. I think what you're describing is the thing that you say, oh, I know it did that on purpose in a sense. I know I should describe it as something that happened for a purpose. You're saying that you can identify that by saying, I look at the whole, I see that every step all along the way was done with forethought, it was sort of thinking all the way along.
It gets to the bottom much faster and ends up much lower than a rock randomly moving, or a rock randomly moving the local probabilities that you would attribute to its next action if the rock is smarter than you, or knows the particular mountain better than you do.
Right, but I mean, so this is the I think the issue, and it's hard for me to take this apart in real time. This is not my usual territory, but it's what you're saying. I mean, this question of what should be described as happening for a purpose versus what should be described merely as happening by mechanism. That's what, and I think what you're saying is your notion of the AI wants is those things which can't really be described meaningfully in terms of mechanism. They sort of can only, the only feasible way to figure out what's going to happen is by a description in terms of purpose. That you're saying you can't work out sort of what's good by just following the mechanism. You can't see what's going to happen. But if you take the model that it's all about purposes, then you can tell what's going to happen.
Well, it's not about can't.
So maybe let me interject and just kind of add a few thoughts here. So I don't particularly find this talk about semantics. I really only use that logic for predicting if AI will kill us. Like we're talking about so many things here, and we're not really talking about that very much. But just kind of getting into this, because I think they do view this as a foundational subject. One thing I will say about intention is that so I used to subscribe to so there's this guy Brett Weinstein. He was a professor at what's it called, Evergreen University, some university in Washington, and he's been on Rogan. His brother's Eric Weinstein. I mean, they're very smart guys, well known, and I used to subscribe to his Patreon in kind of like this high tier of subscription where you can join the group discussions once a month. And so, in one of these things, one of the things that he said that I thought was so interesting, and he's an evolutionary biologist, and he's also a professor, and he's an educator, and so he really breaks things down in a very understandable way. He's such a good teacher and communicator, because that's what he's been doing his whole career. And one of the things that he said, and I'm going to butcher this, but I'll tell you what he said. He said that consciousness is the part of cognition that's packaged for communication. And I think this is such a profound definition that I've never heard anything better than this. Because basically, our minds are working and our bodies are working. So you're hungry, there's going to be signals in your gut, and this is going to go and it's going to affect everything in your body, but it's including your brain. And these signals, there's going to be even neurons in your gut, and these are interconnected with your central nervous system and your brain. And you're going to feel hungry, and then you're going to seek food, and you're going to do all of these things. And that's because your body and your brain are having a physiological experience, so to speak. Like stuff is happening, is what I mean to say. Like stuff is happening in your brain. There are physical things happening in your brain when you think. And you have this experience where almost everything it's like you're watching yourself think, or you're listening to yourself think, and you're able to, it's almost like you are talking to yourself. And I know some people, they hear a voice in their head and some people don't. That's not really the point. The point is that in the same way that someone can communicate with you, you are almost communicating with yourself. Like there is like this presence where you're watching what's going on in your own mind and also what is external. And this is like a blended experience. And so you're able to then take that concept of hunger and you're able to tell someone, I'm hungry. Or you're able to say, or you're able to describe what you're going to do. Because like, look, an animal can be hungry and then they go and they eat. And they might even have some forms of communication amongst themselves, depending on and whatnot. So sorry, my headphones died. Let me just double check that this is good audio still. Okay, you guys can still hear me. Wonderful. So, an animal will just go and seek out food and do all these things. Well, a human can now introspect on that part of cognition that would drive that behavior, because like, to be clear, like an animal is using their nervous system and their brain when they go out and look for food. It's a thing where they intelligently go and they try and find food. So this is part of cognition, but the human is able to introspect that, and as a result they're able to then communicate that. And so that is like everything, there's things going on in your body, like some digestion and all these things. It's lots of physiological processes that you have no insight into in your conscious mind. And those that are important for communicating are the ones that are made available to your conscious experience. And I think this is just so profound. So like maybe you have a stomach pain, that is when digestion gets to a state to which it needs to be brought into your conscious mind, because you might need to actually deal with this situation, like something's wrong. So you want to communicate, don't eat that soup, like we shouldn't eat that anymore, or I need medicine, or I need to rest, and you need to coordinate that with the group. So when you experience pain and it's going into your conscious mind, right, that is because that's important for what the type of thing that needs to be communicated with others. So essentially, human consciousness is really like a social layer that runs in the human mind so that humans can work together. And humans are a social animal. And so I think tying this back to the discussion, the point is that humans are still, we like to think that humans just have this consciousness and that is what their intelligence is for, and they're just kind of living out their conscious experience, and that is basically what drives human action. But really, consciousness is the explanation It's like if you think about, like, people want to have understandable AI, like AI that describes what it does and why it does it. That's essentially what consciousness is. It's the explanation for what you are already thinking. It's not when you're thinking like I'm going to do the math, I'm going to figure this out, and you're walking through those steps. I mean, there may be some feedback loops and stuff, and there might be some kind of like iterative computational mechanism that uses your conscious mind as part of the processing engine for cognition. I'm not saying that it plays no role, just as the external world plays a role in cognition, but fundamentally, you're doing these calculations behind the scenes. Your body and your mind is all of your thoughts are in a sense predetermined, and your conscious experience is like basically deserializing that state into something that is communicable to other humans. And so, like, I'm not good at like referencing studies and all this stuff. I'm not a biologist or evolutionary psychologist, but there are really interesting studies where they'll show people something on a screen and they're able to realize that their brain recognizes it before they consciously recognize it. And so there's a lot of examples of this where you can tell that cognition is occurring before the conscious mind registers it. And I think there's also there's a really famous book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and they talk about how there's these different subsystems in your brain, some of which you have more or less access to in your conscious mind. And I'm not the one to pull out quotes on that. I'd have to go and reread it in order to really nail that analogy and to kind of go down that rabbit hole. But the point is that's what I believe is the best explanation for consciousness. So humans are optimizing for something. They are just like a rock is. There's all the forces in the universe, and it's an equilibrium of all the forces, including gravity. But there's other forces too. All of them are at play to tell where the rock is going to fall and land. And so if it lands into a rivet, it's going to be just basically following just the natural, all the natural laws that you would normally think an object would be subject to. Now, if you have some kind of special rock that avoids the rivets and always goes to the bottom of the mountain, it's following some other kind of algorithm. And this may or may not be predictable. This might be something where that rock had access to a map of the landscape, and you actually know what the algorithm is, so it calculates and goes around and has a little motor on it to jump in different directions. It's totally possible that could be something that's understandable, but it also could be something that's not understandable. Maybe there's a mysterious rock that somehow always falls at the bottom of the mountain no matter what, and it seems to defy other natural laws. It doesn't get caught in the valleys like you would expect. And that's totally reasonable. That would just be some type of intelligent, complex system that we don't understand, just like humans. Humans, we optimize for something, but we don't really know what we're optimizing for. Just like a chess AI is optimizing for winning the chess game, or not necessarily winning the chess game, but at least following its model of the chess game to find the move that it feels best about. And that may not actually end up result in a win. If there's a smarter AI, it's not going to win the chess game. It's going to be doing, according to its model, what it thinks is the best move. And so all that is to say that humans do unpredictable things. We're not following our conscious thought. Our conscious thought is actually not particularly important, except in the fact that it makes us a social animal. And what it does is it allows us to take processes in our brain and put it in someone else's brain through communication, both verbal and nonverbal. And this is a very powerful thing, because then humans can form a distributed computer, essentially. Humans can come together in groups and work in groups, and they can increase the cores of this powerful system when they work together. And that's something that we can talk about and go into more later on in this discussion. I think it's a very important way of thinking about it. But this is why I don't love talking about what is the intention of AI. It's just not really relevant. The fact that we have consciousness and we have goals and intentions. This is not the conscious aspect of it does not really matter for our individual actions. It matters for our ability to communicate and work as a group. We're not really talking about that. We're just talking about one human's actions. What is their goal? What are their intentions? And then we're saying we're kind of in this case, in this discussion, we're asking the question: does AI have goals or intentions? And we're getting into the semantics of it. I think that that's not core to our cognition. It's just basically a networking library that allows us to make a multi-core human processor. So let's keep watching and see what they have to say.
If you take a sufficiently crude chess player, you can, in principle, just literally work it out by paper and pen. But there's also a shortcut mode of reasoning that gets you there much faster. It's heuristically useful. It doesn't give the same perfect prediction as the mechanistic one. The mechanistic level is always more correct, but it is sometimes needlessly expensive for the thing you're actually trying to do.
I apologize. The audio might have been messed up there. It's because my headphones had died. Let me charge them really quick. And okay. In the meantime, I'm going to mute my audio and continue playing the video.
So I mean, back in antiquity, people described a lot of physics in very anthropomorphic terms about what, where rocks wanted to be and things like this. And they got a certain level of description. And even now, people commonly describe their computers wanting to do things and so on, even though, there are forms of explanation where as you say, I agree with that.
I mean, for chess players and your cat, yes. For rocks, I think it was a more questionable decision.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a good idea at the time, 2,000 years ago, but we advanced since then. So the question is,
the fact that my definition has a subjective component doesn't mean that you get to just say it for anything and be correct. I think it is fair to say that cats and dogs want more strongly than rocks, and anybody who says otherwise is mistaken about how rocks work.
Well, okay, but this is your.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that. I think what is want? I mean, he's the one introducing these terms. Nobody else wants to say this type of thing. So he really needs to defend, he needs to provide us with a framework for thinking about this and using these types of anthropomorphic terms. What does want mean? And he's tried doing that, I get it. But it's not really landing, and it doesn't really seem even particularly necessary. Let's just talk about what we know about these systems instead of using this type of a term. It's really hard whenever you reason with metaphors. As you stack these metaphors, each layer, it gets more and more, the error grows. Like a metaphor is like a heuristic for imprecisely describing something, and sometimes it's the best toolkit that you have. But as you kind of start making these very important predictions, like what is AI going to do? Is it going to kill everybody? If you have too many metaphors, the error starts to compound, and when you start reasoning by analogy, you get into really incorrect places. And the other thing I just say is the reason why we say that cats and dogs have want more than rocks, which is a reasonable thing to say, by the way. But I just think it's not reasonable to introduce that into this discussion and then basically not be willing to provide a very robust framework for discussing these types of terms. If you're going to say want and goals and intentions and the desires and these types of things, if you're going to apply that to AI and you're bringing that into the conversation, give us the framework. How do we precisely use this? What is the toolkit for how we reason in this way? And I haven't seen him do this in a compelling way, although it's difficult in debate too. But I guess my final point on this is that cats and dogs are very similar to humans from a biological and physical standpoint. Like there's multicellular life that emerged, and mammalian life, and we are all mammals. We've co-evolved. They're domesticated. They're in our households. They're a functioning piece of society. Even, I mean, there's police dogs. So it's not crazy to map the literal neurophysiology of want, whatever that even means for humans, which is already hard to define for humans. But want and desire and emotions, to map that onto dogs is not much of a stretch. Just like there are things that you can say, stockfish, and even something probably architecturally different, but like Google's Alpha line of, I think they have like a really powerful chess bot themselves. I don't know what they called Alpha Chess. I don't know if that's what they called it, but those two things, there's going to be similarities between these, or there's going to be similarities in how you can think about Claude and GPT 4.0, right? These are going to have similarities. So anyway, let's continue.
You're okay. From the outside, what the cat thinks on the inside, we don't know, right? What we can see is from the outside, it is a much easier description that, the cat wants to eat this piece of cat food than to say this chain of neurons in the cat's brain made it do this, that, and the other, right?
Yep. In this case, the mechanistic description is actually beyond our knowledge. We don't have a complete scan of the cat's brain. We would have trouble running it even if we had it. Mm-hmm. In this case, we actually, the teleological explanation for the cat is all we have. The cat is planning to end up having swallowed the food. That's why you can put it in different starting locations around the room and it will move to the bowl and eat what's in the bowl.
Right. Okay. So there is a form of explanation about what's going on that is a convenient form of explanation that involves, wants and purposes and things like that. So one question we might ask is take an LLM or take a modern AI and ask the question, in describing what it does, we've been pretty bad at describing mechanistically what it does. It feels much more like we can describe it in terms of wants, because it feels much more that, at least that's my impression. Maybe that's the point you're making, is that the human terms say what it's going to do.
I think that that's currently a much more fraught statement to make about large language models than it is to make about the Stockfish 16 chess playing system. I think that when you look at Stockfish 16 and you say it wants to defend a pawn, you are on a much firmer territory than if you look at 3.5.1 Sonnet. And
logical statement that I'm not certain. Playing chess is an easier to define activity than being helpful. So it's a little bit easier to say, if from the outside, the behavior is consistent with it wanting to defend the pawn, so to speak, because the set of things that you do in defending a pawn is more straightforward to define than the set of things you might do to, quotes, be helpful.
Or something like when I actually interact with these large language models, I don't feel like I'm usually asking myself, what does it want? For one thing, they're still, in my experience, not quite capable of doing very much that I want them to do as yet. They just fall down if I ask them to do that, because they're not very good at planning or correcting their mistakes even after you point out their mistakes to them. I'm usually asking them for information, and ideally information I can look up afterwards. And they're usually truthful if I don't ask them to do any math. Maybe they corrected that by now in like GPT-01 or something, but back in the old days, they would just drop 3 orders of magnitude in some random calculation.
Unless they were using our technology as a tool, but that's a different story. But let's take the example of a self-driving car, okay? And whether it wants to, it's trying to get to a particular, it's trying to make a particular turn. But to do that, it has to drive through traffic, for example. So I think that's a case where we probably say, it wants to make that turn. That will be a reasonable description of what it's doing.
We can put it in subtly different initial conditions and change the environment around it, and it'll still make the turn, or at least not crash. It doesn't want to crash. You can do a pretty good prediction of what this thing will do and what will happen as a result, where you say, this car doesn't want to crash.
Okay, I agree.
Could I just make a very quick comment here? Just 'cause I think some of the audience might.
One other thing that I should say, I'm trying not to interject at every single point and just go down every possible rabbit hole because this video is gone. There, you know, when you have defending the pawn is even to say that. Yeah, I mean, I get the overall point, but even something like defending the pawn, it's hard to exactly say because there's many ways of even looking at that statement. You could say, you know, let's say you move your bishop forward and that, you know, prevents someone from taking the pawn, whatever. Are you sacrificing the bishop? Are you defending the pawn? Are like what like there's many different ways of looking at the same thing. Like even if you're not directly sacrificing the bishop, you are making some kind of trade-off in which the bishop is more at risk, but you're also dominating the center perhaps, right? You're also doing this, and like the point is you are doing something, and it maybe in effect it does defend the pawn. That's one way of looking at it, but I just don't think it's a very tight analogy. And I think Stephen Wolfram correctly said, well, maybe we could tighten this up, but let's move on from this subject. Anyway, without going down too many rabbit holes, let's continue listening.
And not be able to follow some of the things you're talking about. Is it fair to say, Eliezer, that you're making an epistemically subjective argument about an observer's perceptions of goals or wants of a system?
Tim, that was more technically complicated than anything you've said. But go on.
Thomas Nagel made an argument about epistemic subjectivity, about the bat, and John Searle made the ontologically subjective argument about the Chinese room. But my point is, though, is that there's the actual behavior of the thing. The agent has all of these goals. And actually, Eliezer, I would love you to describe the relationship between coherence and intelligence, because some of those goals might be very complex and they might scale in strange ways with intelligence. But just to this previous point, are you saying that as bounded observers, to use Stephen's language, we perceive the wants, the goals to be somewhat different to what they actually may be?
So, there's a slight clash of like philosophical frameworks and emphases here going on. Like when I try to talk about a stance we can take with respect to a chess player or perhaps later a super intelligence, and talk about whether it applies to current large language models, I'm like, well, if we hypothesize this thing about the AI, what are we hypothesizing? What does it lead us to predict? How is it different from just predicting a rock? And what I was trying to put my finger down there is like the difference in what you predict when you, with your limited computing power and your bounded intellect, I have a bounded intellect too, it's not an insult, in your bounded intellect, try to get a grasp on the system. You can't follow line by line because you just don't have the time. It's not that you couldn't do it in principle, you just don't have the time. Like, what does it mean? What is the consequence of the prediction? So I am talking about a state of mind, but it's not like a sort of weird subjective state of mind. I was trying to nail it down. I was just trying to say, like, what can we hypothesize? And the thing that we can hypothesize is this thing's actions will end up leading to a certain endpoint. We might not even know the trajectory it's going to take to get there. Like, if we don't know the details of the mountain, the rock's choices may be things that we don't understand even after seeing them. But we may still be able to predict that the sentient rock ends up at the bottom of the mountain because it was choosing each path along the way, even though we don't know what it knew. And this is the, like, how to get a grasp on a thing that's, a better chess player than you. What does it mean to say that something is a better chess player than you? You can't predict exactly where it's going to move as a result of saying you believe this thing about it. If you could predict exactly where it would move, you would be that good at chess yourself. You just move wherever you predict that Stockfish moves. The content of our belief that Stockfish is a better chess player is that its actions will lead to it ending up in a winning game state. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I'm letting Stephen come in.
Well, I don't know what I was confused by the epistemic subjectivity kind of.
One thing I'll say is, if you're really good at chess, let's say you're better than Stockfish at chess, and such that you could potentially predict what Stockfish is going to do, you still probably wouldn't be able to predict what Stockfish is going to do. And we can relate this to computational irreducibility or whatever, or just the predictability of complex systems in general, which newsflash, you cannot predict what a complex system is going to do. And so the thing is even if you're like the heuristic that Stockfish is going to make the best move is a decent one, but it's not accurate. It's not actually going to make the best move. It's going to make the move that its model classifies and as the next move. It's going to it's kind of like a self-evident thing. Whatever it chooses is what it's going to do, and it's not the absolute best, because I think there actually are AIs that are better than Stockfish. So Stockfish is going to do what Stockfish is going to do. That happens to win some of the time against humans who are relatively bad at chess. However, if you're very good at chess, if you're better than Stockfish, you still can't predict it. But I get what he's saying. What he's saying is that even though we don't know the path, we know the destination. And I think that is relatively reasonable. I mean, there's a way of, I think the philosophy that he's spouting as the reason, you can poke holes in it. You can poke holes in the fact that the AI wants to win chess, and it has goals, and it has these plans, and it uses these plans to get to its goal of winning chess. Like maybe that doesn't necessarily mean the AI actually has goals, depending on what you mean by goals. Like, you can go down this route, you can dispute this, you can nitpick, you can go down rabbit holes. But I think what he's saying is effectively reasonable, that an AI could decide or want to kill people and try to and have goals of killing people, or goals that as an intermediary step along the way involves killing people, or maybe accidentally kills people, or whatever. There's a variety of things that AI can do that effectively are equivalent to the AI wanting to kill people, whatever want means. We don't need to get too philosophical. It's reasonable. And I think nobody, if you just don't apply philosophy here, nobody would disagree. Now, is that likely? Is there evidence that we should be worried about this? Like, what is the reasons? Again, let's get to this part of the discussion. That is what is important.
Kind of story.
Oh yes, it's. I think it's very analogous to your notion of us being computationally bounded as observers. So it simply means we have a cognitive horizon, and there are things which are inconceivable to us.
Okay, but so what we've got is, I think what Eliezer was going towards is the statement of there's sort of a ranking of chess players, and one question with respect to AI and the world is the world rankable in that way? In other words, chess is a very tiny microcosm of the world, and if we say the way to win, the question is, how do we win the planet? What does it even mean to win the planet? And if there is if it is like chess, if winning the planet is like chess, then there's some notion, whatever they're called, these what are they called, the scores,
Elo,
Elo.
I think.
Elos, yes, okay, right. The scores for who's better than who. Are you imagining that there's sort of a game being played between the AIs and the humans, and that is a microcosm type game like chess, where it's kind of like who's going to win the planet? Is that kind of the
Well, suppose we go back to the analogy of the Native Americans facing down the invading Europeans. There's a lot of games along the lines of carve this particular bow and arrow where overlap. There's intersection. The Native Americans cannot just leave the parts of reality that the Europeans have access to. They need to eat. They need to be on the land. They need to be hunting the animals. They need for the animals to not have already been hunted. And they need for nobody else to have fenced them out of that land, chased them out of that land, or shot them. And
So this is good. Good question by Wolfram. Good answer by Yudkowsky. I hope we stay on this thread, so we can say, okay, we get it. We get what he's saying. There is this kind of battle for resources on the planet. The AIs on the planet, the humans are on the planet. There could be a battle for resources, just like with Native Americans and Europeans, and there is an example of one group of intelligences conquering another, right? That's a great one. So, are we going to have a trail of tears in the future, all humanity? Let's see the evidence. Let's put forth. Okay, we get the class of problem we're dealing with. Now, what is the evidence that it will happen?
And so there's different games, but there's we can't just, leave all of the games that the AI may want to play, because the games the AI wants to play may involve atoms, and we need some atoms from somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So once is so let's say we've got
So there is a scarce number of atoms in this locale of the universe. And the AI might want them, and we definitely want ours. And we don't need every atom, but we need a good number of atoms. We need the atoms in our bodies and in our houses, and on the farmland and all of that stuff. Like we could give AI some portion of the atoms in the area. There's plenty of atoms to go around, but presumably, right, there could be like an AI that's like, we really want these atoms, and they could be fighting us for them.
As it's happening, we have autonomous killer drones or whatever, right? And they're a thing that's based on AI, and those are one can see sort of a somewhat realistic path where those things get pretty good at what they're doing. And I suppose your contention would be that one of the types of situations would be those things become so good at being killer drones that no human can possibly, succeed against them. And insofar as they've been set on the course of being a killer drone that, for whatever reason, is going to try and kill everybody, that will be the result.
That is the classic science fiction scenario. It is not the scenario that I'm worried about. I expect it, this to be born in a lab, in a giant open source online collaboration, which I would normally regard as very virtuous and noble, but not if it leads to everybody being killed. There's only so good you can get at being a drone. That what the AI needs to kill us is to be better at strategy, better at building, better at inventing technology. It is not going to kill us until it has its own factories and its own equivalent of electrical generation. It would have to be quite stupid and smart at the same time to kill us before it had replaced us as factory workers. It does not have to be smart and stupid at the same time, I'm afraid, to kill us after we have been replaced as factory workers.
Okay, so let's just walk through the what happens, because one thing, as sort of computation runs its course, what I kind of see in the computational universe is most computations do things that just aren't terribly relevant to what we humans care about or where we exist or all those kinds of things. But you're saying, imagine this thing has been created that is kind of and again, I'm still kind of concerned about this idea about the thinking that it's kind of this one-dimensional ELO based kind of way of competing with things.
It doesn't have to beat you at chess to kill you. It just has to beat you at guns.
Yes, but okay, but so let's imagine this thing is created. Walk me through what the what's you don't like the science fiction scenario. So what's your scenario for how the world ends type thing?
OpenAI builds GPT 7, 5, 14. Timing these things is much, much harder than predicting where they end up eventually. Historically, scientists have sometimes made correct calls about the future. The ones who made correct calls about the future very rarely predicted it down to the year.
So,
yeah, but there are a whole class of mistakes that you can make, like cognitive biases, when you assume things are infinite. So if you just assume that there's an infinite amount of time for something to happen and that everything is going to basically be a smooth curve up and to the right, although these trends do seem to hold, to make that assumption is erroneous. And like, I'm not going to do a good job of representing such things, but I think Nassim Taleb documents cases in which you, for example, maybe there is, maybe there's some reason to make a certain investment, or you have like the return on investment is going to be, profitable, most likely under some scenario. Like, for example, you could play Russian roulette with one bullet in the revolver and all the other cases for the bullet are empty. So there's one bullet. So you don't know if, when you shoot yourself in the head, you don't know if it has a bullet or if it's not, if it does not. $1 million if you survive one shot with Russian roulette. Now, let's say there's overall like 6 chambers. I don't even know how much a revolver has in it. Let's say there's 6 of them, and one of them has a bullet, and then 5 are empty. So there is like, your expected value of that is like, you could either 1/5 lose $1 million, but 5/6 you're going to win $1 million, double your net worth. So that could be a profitable trade. But is that a good idea? No, it's not, because you would die. And so you only have one life. And so, for example, like, this is not like some infinite game where there's an infinite number of times to get the expected return, right? And similarly, like, like, there's a lot of people who kind of make these portfolios that, if they blow up, are going to completely take it down to zero. Like, there's a difference between going down by 99% and going down by 100%. Because if you go down by 99%, you can then still go up. If you're in some sort of very volatile asset class, you can go up and down, but you can't come back from going down by 100%. Like, you can go up 100%, you can go down 100%, and then you're done. So there's all these times where people, like, the numbers seem to work on an infinite time scale, but you're actually, there are things that, when you just think about it as a continuous game of infinite divisibility and infinite rolls of the dice, you actually end up coming to the wrong conclusions. And so I think this is, in part, when you say that you can't predict the timing, it's a huge red flag, because it's basically wrong. Like, again, nobody in the world everyone agrees with that. Even, again, as I said, a random number generator could theoretically kill everybody. It's possible. It's just astronomically unlikely. And so, if you don't know the timing, you don't know what you're doing. It just doesn't, you have no credibility. But anyway, I get what he's saying. Let's just keep going.
I mean, I was reading a lot of stuff from the early 1960s about neural nets and AI and so on. And I have to say, many of the paragraphs that people were saying in the early 1960s, I could take that paragraph and I could say that was just written in 2024, and everybody would not be surprised.
Eliezer.
Yeah, and in a previous stream, I did actually talk about some of these. It's pretty funny. It's like, in a few years, we'll have an AI as intelligent as a human, and all this stuff. And I went back all the way to the 40s, talked about like Alan Turing and all these people, and how there was basically, for decades and decades, there's been almost no progress in AI. There's been a few times where they've, like, there's the initial kind of idea, they built these expert systems, they had some limited capabilities. Then at some point they discovered neural nets a few decades later. And there were some interesting things that came from that, including there was demos in the 80s of self-driving cars and stuff like that. But it wasn't sophisticated enough to actually go on the road like what we have today with Tesla. And then, basically there was a very slow amount of progress, although not nothing. Like we got like handwriting, deep neural networks, and all these things. But really, it's been essentially a pretty slow AI, AI winter up until around the time of COVID, where what's it called? Transformer architecture came along.
On this.
Sure.
Just very quickly, because right now the language models are trained on human distributions of data.
Somewhat.
And you were somewhat, but you were the reason I was getting to this kind of where do the wants come from and the goals. I think a lot of cognitive scientists argue that agency is an as-if property, so it's an epistemic thing, it's not an ontological thing. So if I understand correctly, you're saying that if a system behaves in a certain way and it does predictions and so on, as observers we can kind of talk about it as if it had goals, and then we can talk about language models as if they had agency. But you're now making the argument that at some level of scale, the agency, the wants, will kind of diverge from the statistical distribution of the data that they're trained on. So could you explain where that gap happens?
So predicting the next token is a different sort of mode from selecting actions based on which outcomes they lead to. And although your modern large language model is initially trained by predicting very large masses of data that include human text outputs, but also images. They could include like sequences of weather observations. They can include all kinds of things besides human data, but they also include human data. And what you have at the end of this is a thing that is good at predicting the next token, which is not merely predicting the next token, because as numerous people have observed at this point, to predict the next observation, you have to predict the thing that is generating the observations. This is in fact the whole basis of science. We predict our experimental observations on the basis of what we think is happening behind the scenes. And when we have a good idea of what's happening behind the scenes, we can make better guesses about what observations we'll get. But this is not planning.
But I wish you would apply this to AI, because it seems like he is not following the scientific method, and instead he's just using logical deduction. But let's let him make his case.
And this is also not the chatbot that you see. The chatbot that you see, once it is initially trained to predict what humans say next on the internet and also sequences of weather data and whatever, is then retrained to say things that humans rate as more helpful. It is trained both by saying it is one stage of that retraining is training it to give particular responses to particular questions instead of what a random person on the internet would say if that thing were a random internet conversation. But then even after that, there's a further stage of retraining. More thumbs up. Not from general users in the way this usually happened, but from like a bunch of people being paid $2 an hour in English-speaking countries with countries where some people speak English and you can pay lower wages. The word delve is famously overused by ChatGPT because they asked people because they pay people less to train it. In, I believe, if I recall correctly, Nigeria, where if you speak English in Nigeria, you use delve a bunch more than people who speak English in America or London. So these people giving thumbs up, thumbs down, and now you're getting into the actions end up with things that have the action property. I have not looked into it in detail because various people are saying various things over time, but allegedly ChatGPT can play chess, and not by making a function call to a specialized chess playing system, but just because it read enough chess games. And
So that's interesting. I'm not sure that you can even make that causal link that the AI is predicting a token such that it gets the thumbs up. I mean, what it's doing is it's being steered by the thumbs up for sure. So it's generating, like, I guess, different versions of the same text. And then the people are basically adjusting the weights based off of the which generation was better. So it's going to have already generated things, and it's getting steered by that process of human feedback. That's definitely true. I'm not sure that that means that it is aiming for thumbs up. I think it just has a different worldview of what text it should output, and that is steered by what happens to be thumbs up or not thumbs up. But I don't really know if that's an important distinction, so I'm not going to dwell on that.
And try to win those chess games. And I'm not quite sure what the state of this is exactly. I know that when people specifically tried to train a large language model to play chess, they were allegedly able to do that just fine, even though it has a very different architecture and it can't do anything like the in-depth search that the, mainline super strong chess players use. So you can do that without the thumbs up, thumbs down idiom. And one way you can do that, for example, is to tell it at the start of the game who won. And then and if you tell it that black won the game, then it's got to predict moves by the black player that are likely to win given the moves that the white player has made. So, it's a bit subtle here.
By the way, I think and those are things which are somewhat aligned with what humans can easily do. And there are things which formal computation can do, but at least the current kind of architecture of things like large language models really is not good at doing. And
like multiplication.
But yes, as an intrinsic feature. But I mean, it's worth realizing that probably because the actual architecture of neural nets is somewhat similar to the actual architecture of brains, the kinds of things and the kinds of decisions that these types of AIs make are somewhat similar to what humans can do. And so, the things, it's the things that humans can do, they'll be able to do. Maybe the things that only computers can do, well, only computers will be able to do them. But I don't think this is important to your argument. I mean, I think you're kind of going as I understand it, you're going in the direction of saying what defines the wants. If you are going to describe the action of the AI in terms of wants, if that's your form of description, where are those wants going to come from? Is that where you're going with this?
So wanting is an effective way of doing, and that's why humans ended up doing things. Planning is an effective way of getting there, and that's why humans ended up planning things. We were not explicitly selected to be great planners. We were selected to survive and reproduce over and over again. And it turns out that, planning how to bring down a deer or fight off a vicious ostrich or whatever.
No, I don't. Okay, I do not agree with this. As I was saying earlier, there's evolutionary literature to back up everything I'm going to say, and perhaps maybe refute what I'm going to say. But from my understanding, I'm just going to tell you my understanding. That what I would say is not that planning has helped us in any sense, in the sense that we create a plan and we think about it in advance, and we then we deliberate and we have this plan, and now we act on the plan. Like that process in our head, it's not clear to me that is actually that is not core to intelligence. And that is actually for the sake of communication, so that humans can work in groups. Now, there may be some element where you can kind of, like you can imagine a cat kind of sneaking up and finding the right position before it pounces on some sort of prey. That's a thing. So, and that's kind of like planning, but the cat does not actually have a plan. The cat, there may be some element that is similar to human cognition. There may be some level of consciousness that a cat has. I don't know. But it's going to be much, much less. They're not having bullet points and a plan and all these conditional things. And there's not like a thought process, a chain of thought. That does not exist in a cat. A cat is just doing this instinctually. There is planning that's going on in the cat's brain, but it doesn't have a plan. It's just a prediction of the neural architecture of the cat's brain that is leading it to, yeah, maybe gather information and feel when the time is right. But this stuff is all happening in the background. It doesn't necessarily have a plan. It just does what it does. And it does the thing that tends to make it survive and achieve its goals that were shaped by the evolutionary landscape upon which cats came to be. And so similarly, an AI, it's not a given that it's going to have a plan. It's just going to do what it's going to do. And what it's going to do is going to be shaped by the environment that brought it into this world. And that would be the training process and the markets in which these training processes lived. So, like, for example, giving satisfactory responses could be a force that shapes this, because a company that's training an AI that gives satisfactory responses would make more of that AI, and that AI would be perpetuated. So there is some sort of evolutionary process that's going to steer what the AI is going to do. Now, that's different than the survival skill set of natural selection on Earth historically. And so humans have a different objective than AIs. They're not necessarily trying to do the same thing. Sometimes it could overlap, but it's not necessarily true. Cats are much more similar to humans. They were brought up in the same way, and they do have this. They hunt for mice and other animals and whatever, and they do some kind of proto-planning. You could equate it to planning in the sense that they're gathering information and doing things at a time that is better than maybe some other time if they were perhaps less intelligent, as you might say. But at the end of the day, they're not actually planning. They're not making a plan. They have no conscious plan. The plan, when you are making a game plan, this is for the sake of communication with other humans, because humans are social animals.
Right. Here's the thing that surprised me. Okay, it's a recent thing that I got interested in kind of the why biological evolution works, which is somewhat related to why machine learning works.
Very
And the question
related.
is, if you define an objective and you evolve things, you change the underlying rules of some program to achieve that objective. The thing that has been super surprising to me is you look at the pictures of how the objective is achieved, and it's achieved in these incredibly ornate, you would never have invented that way to achieve it kinds of ways. So in other words, this, given the overall objective, if you ask, what's the mechanism? Can you explain what's happening? No way. It's just that my analogy here for machine learning, for example, is what's actually happening in machine learning. Well, you say, I want to build a wall. Okay, you can build a wall out of bricks. Each brick is nicely, shaped, and you can sort of engineer the wall by arranging the bricks. But machine learning is not doing that. Machine learning is instead finding kind of lumps of computation, kind of like lying around, like rocks lying around on the ground. And it's managing to find a way to kind of fit those rocks together so that it successfully builds something which you would consider to be a wall.
Yeah, this is another way of thinking. In past streams, we've talked about this idea of software 2.0. This is something that Andre Karpathy has put forward, and I think it's a great model of thinking about AI and other things. So basically, here's how it works. When software 1.0, you understand the problem, and this is how you build the software to solve the problem. You decompose the problem. So if you want to build a calculator app, you understand what buttons you're going to want on the screen. You're going to understand what each value corresponds for each button, or which mathematical operation. You're going to create a formula that can calculate these things, and you're going to figure out how to render this on the screen. You're going to break each problem down and give the computer the exact instructions. This is equivalent to what Stephen Wolfram is saying about building a brick wall. You want a wall, so you precisely lay out the bricks according to a formula of one brick on top of another. Now, what does AI do? AI is software 2. So software 2, what you're doing is you're running gradient descent, and you're minimizing the error of your software. But in doing that, you're basically running back propagation on a neural network, which adjusts the weights of this neural network so that when you put in an input, something different comes out as an output. And by having a deep neural network, you're able to have a very complicated function that gets generated in this way. And so what you do is as he said, it's like finding rocks. And um, and finding the way to assemble all these different pieces. And what it is it's a search problem. So there's a space of all possible neural networks, and you are running this optimization function inside of it in order to build up the weights in order to do things in a way that is useful. And so you're essentially searching for the solution. And the way that you do this is by running an immense amount of computation and using an immense amount of data. You slowly can actually build up your computation over time by just having immense scale. And eventually you can get it to do things that are really cool. And what you have is like, imagine, like what he's kind of saying is like, imagine you have a bunch of rocks on the ground. It's not going to be obvious how you can put these rocks together to build a wall. That's going to be a very complicated thing. If you have a bunch of bricks, you can easily create an algorithm to say, take a brick, put a brick on top of it, and maybe put a brick next to it and just make this wall. But how are you going to get all these differently shaped rocks together? You're going to want, it's going to be a much more complicated formula. And so by continuously adjusting this algorithm, every time a rock doesn't fit, you go back and you say, that was the wrong way to build it. We need to go back. And by basically doing this a million times over, you're training this neural network, you're searching for a way to build a wall with all of these different rocks. And if you think about like the input to a neural network is a bunch of rocks on the ground that are unsorted, you can actually transform them into something great, like a wall that's a completely sorted, output. And so anyway, that's like going from perception space to what's the concept space. But anyway, let's continue watching.
Or to be exact, like natural selection is fitting rocks together, and gradient descent is doing the same thing, but the rocks are on a slope.
Maybe,
okay, did that make
yes.
any...
I mean, that yeah, right. But the basic point is that the raw material are these things which are not built to be understandable. They just happen to fit in this or that way. And
yeah,
I think...
And that is where I was going with there, that like you apply gradient descent to make the AI models better and better at solving various problems and predicting various things. And along the way, there's these little internal processes that find that they can effectively get where they are going by trying to keep something on a track, behaving like a thermostat. And being a thermostat is not being like a super intelligent planner, but this is where the bare beginnings of preference begin to form inside the system, is that there's some place inside it where it knows where in its like few layers of like building up of transformer layers, I guess I'll just go ahead and say, or in its chain of thought processes, it has been selected to get to some destination, and it finds that the way you get to that destination is by modeling something and seeing like, is it off to the left, is it off to the right, and steering it back on track. And this is like the nematode, this is like the tiny earthworm level of wanting things, but it is where things begin. And they may be much further than that along the trajectory of wanting by now, but we wouldn't necessarily know.
Well, the way I would describe it is, if I look inside one of these things that I've evolved, okay, which I can, conveniently, I've gotten nice ways to actually just visualize what's happening, which has been very difficult in neural nets. I have a simplified version of neural nets where you can actually visualize what's happening, where you can do training and visualize the results. And the main conclusion is, when you visualize the results, the way that the objective is achieved is ornate and incomprehensible. And, but nevertheless, you can see, yes, if you look at it, every bit follows every other bit in the right way. And in the end, you can see that it did achieve that objective. And now, if what you're saying is that in the achievement of that objective, some particular, training or whatever, some particular rock you picked up will have a particular shape unknown to you, and which has certain, in a sense, preferences that were not put in there. The only preference was, I want to make these rocks part of what you are defining by just knowing you want to build it up into a wall. So in a sense, there are coincidental preferences that get inserted just by the mechanism of what happens that you didn't put there, so to speak.
There's multiple levels here is the critical thing. Like,
I'm going to not go down too many rabbit holes here because I want to just let them flesh out their argument. I won't interject too much. But if you want to see more about these visualizations of neural networks, I have a video called Diving into AI. Go check it out. It was sometime last week that I published it. So yeah, go check that out, and we dive into this type of stuff in detail. But let's let them talk.
When you look at a fluffy seed dropped by a tree, evolution has shaped the seed to drift along in the air, but eventually come down and eventually plant itself. The seed itself is not doing very much thinking. A spider is doing some thinking. A mouse is doing more thinking. Humans are doing thinking that is so general that we can start to build our own artifacts that are carefully shaped the same way that evolution builds artifacts that are carefully shaped. So with a large language model, you have on the one hand the outer process that is shaping it to be a great predictor. And that thing is like very clearly steering in a particular direction. It's simple. It's code. We understand the thing that builds the AI model. But the AI model built probably has some fantastically ornate, weird stuff going on in there, like human biochemistry.
Yes, we do not understand it. It's a complex system. We do not understand it. We need evidence and reasons. We need to use the scientific method to know what it's going to do. That's all there is to it. We need evidence, and so he has not brought evidence to know that it's going to kill us. So they've talked earlier about this battle for atoms. Like there's a scarce number of atoms. Let's hear the evidence. Why do they need our atoms? Why does the AI need our atoms? We don't know that it necessarily needs our atoms and that it's necessarily going to try to kill us or do something that will result in us being killed. We need evidence for that. It is weird. We don't understand it. Exactly. Since we don't understand it, since it is a complex system that we can't predict, that's why we need the evidence. We cannot logically deduce that this is going to happen.
Only, we can see it and we still can't decrypt it. And then there's like the plans that it would make if it's doing planning. And it probably does that, which has the teleology nature of it makes this move because because of how that leads to the final outcome. So it's like the plans that it now makes don't necessarily need to be very ornate, but there's probably a fantastically weird ornate planner in there, if there's a planner in there at all.
Well, I think, okay, several points. I mean, first of all, this whole question about there's some overall thing that's happening, and then there are ornate details about how it actually works inside. I mean, that's true of many physical processes as well as these processes that you're talking about being sort of intelligence-related processes. So, I mean, as you imagine some flow of water around, rocks, that will make some very ornate pattern, and as it carves out pieces of rock, the overall flow may be, the river is basically going in this direction. The water has to go from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill. But it carves out this very elaborate pattern on its way to doing that for reasons of the details of how water works and maybe how,
There's simple laws governing the water, but the water carves out a very complicated pattern on its way to the bottom.
Yeah, right. And so I mean, I think what's happening I agree that as you give sort of all you're specifying is sort of play chess or whatever else. So you're specifying
There's simple laws governing how water works, but you cannot deduce that based off of just studying subatomic particles. Like there's H2O, but then you go down in there and there's electrons and whatever. I mean, I don't even know what all these things are called, bosons and all this stuff. And this is a whole world. And you cannot deduce fluid dynamics and how water would behave and all these types of things just based off of that. Like how exactly these particles interact by just looking at these particles, you don't know what's going on in the river. And so the way that we know how water works is because we studied water. Water is complex. There's simple rules, but that's a macro rule. That's a rule of the macro system. But when you look at the micro state of the system, that doesn't mean anything to us. And so a river, since we have rivers, we have evidence, we know what rivers do. And it ends up being pretty simple. And we also know, as Yudkowsky was saying, chess AIs that we've built in a certain way tend to perform very well and beat people. We know that because we've studied it. But we don't know what a general AI is going to do. We need evidence for that. You cannot say that water, a river, is simple and AI is complicated. Both are complex.
Kind of objective, what we think of as an objective. The details of what's happening inside, we will not, there will be aspects of that mechanism inside is not one that we understand. The mechanism inside will not be, if we took apart that mechanism and we say, is this mechanism doing what we expect here? It won't be. There'll be plenty of things where it's doing what it chooses to do, or because that particular training run gave this particular result, or whatever else, picked up this particular rock to build that part of the stone wall, not another one. So that, yes, there are pieces inside that are definitely not, that cannot be explained on the basis of the overall objective we specified. Now, I think maybe
or rather have a non-simple relationship to the. There is a fact of the matter. There's a mechanistic historical fact about how the complicated stuff got there, but it's not simple. And if we're thinking in bounded quick terms, like whatever.
Yeah, but so inside the AIs, they're doing stuff that wasn't particularly anything we trained them to do. They're just doing stuff because that's how they happened to set themselves up.
Because it solved a previous problem that it was trained to do. Or even it's just like random, or it's it's some input that wasn't in its training distribution, and now it's behaving in some weird way.
Right. But so then if we say that internal thing is going to be the thing that determines whether the car should drive left or right or something like this, then that's going to be something which is not well aligned with the thing that we happen to give as the training data. And I don't know whether that's where you're going with this, but that's I would agree that that's the case, that if you start saying, is that sub goal something which we can understand on the basis of the whole goal? The answer is probably no.
Like the internal preferences end up being this bizarre, complicated structure that does not directly correspond to the outer training loop.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that is a central worry.
Okay.
And in particular,
so what? So what? That's my question.
So when it gets super intelligent, it does a thing that the builders were not very in control of and kills you.
Okay, but hold on a second. We've got a bit of a jump there.
We do.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. This is getting good. This is hopefully they stay on subject and really get to the crux of the disagreement here.
Acknowledge that there was a bit of a jump there.
Right. So the fact that there are unexpected things that happen. Both, by the way, one global thing I might say, I think there is an important societal choice, which I think maybe is what you're getting at some level, which is between, do we want computationally irreducible things in the world, or do we want to force everything to be computationally reducible? So what do I mean by that? I mean,
making the government more computationally reducible would be a start, but maybe I shouldn't divert into politics that way.
Well, governments are like machines, or they're like our computers. You give them certain rules, and then they operate according to those rules.
But if they had fewer rules and the rules were more human,
this was getting good. And Yudkowsky was the one who was the biggest advocate for staying on subject. And now we're talking about this tangent. No, please.
And even knows what all the rules are. Well, already nobody can read all the rules, but now they're actually being applied to you.
Right. I'm sort of reminded of the Ethereum DAO story, but let's not go there. If we have a simple set of rules, the problem is, one problem that comes out of science I've done is that even when the set of rules is quite simple, the actual behavior will often be very complicated, and there will be aspects of that behavior that surprise you. So even if you say, let's have our whole society based on, the Code of Hammurabi, which is written on one tablet, it will turn out that most of the time to be a practical set as one.
So I think it's not just the computational irreducibility. I think intelligence seeks out the weird path through government rules, through the universe and the laws of physics, through life in general in many ways. The way of getting the most money inside the system often involves doing some things that the designers of the system did not think of. When the group with that guy, some of you might have already guessed which guy I'm talking about. So I'm not even talking about Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm like a much smaller crypto exchange with a flaw in its code.
Right, right,
a
right.
but it's not that the code defied the laws of physics. It's that to make the most money, that guy found a behavior of the code that the
Right,
designers did not have in mind.
right.
So
But
there's a way that cellular automata get surprising just because they're computationally hard to skip over the intervening steps. And then there's people thinking about how to break the system from inside. And those people make them systematically weirder
okay, but so I don't
until they
disagree.
break.
But okay, but my point about society in general is you can be in a situation where you say, I want to understand all the machinery around me. You know, before the Industrial Revolution, when we were using horses and donkeys and things, most of the time we didn't understand the machinery that we were using. You didn't understand, you knew what you could get the donkey to do, but you didn't think you knew how the donkey worked inside. Then, post-industrial revolution, it's like, oh, we have this cog here, this lever here. We can understand what's happening inside the machine. And that's kind of, we can imagine a world in which every piece of machinery we use, it's understandable what happens. Unfortunately, that world is very sterile because that world has, imagine that we could know for humans everything. Imagine that humans were so controlled that we could know everything that humans are going to do. Humans are never going to do the wrong thing. They're always going to do, just the things that we programmed them to do. Well, forget free will, forget kind of, a value to leading life, so to speak. It's all kind of, we can trivially jump over it and just say the answer is going to be
Sentient
this.
life should not be computationally reducible. The only way you should be able to figure out what it does is by going through the intervening steps.
Indeed, but given that idea, you are giving up. So, one notion is the only machines we should have in the world are computationally reducible machines where we can know what they will do. And we should outlaw computational irreducibility. We should say no machine
I mean,
should.
that's outlawing large language models. That's even outlawing AI chess players.
Yes, but I'm asking you, I'm saying as soon as you allow computational irreducibility, you allow the unexpected. And what you're saying is there is a chance that the unexpected kills us all. And
No. I expect it to systematically kill us all. I'm not being like, we don't understand it, therefore it might kill us. I'm being like, there are aspects of this that we can understand and thereby predict that it will kill us.
okay,
I can't predict the intervening steps, but I can predict where it ends up.
Okay, so I mean, one way to prevent that would be to say outlaw anything computationally irreducible, and just say we must understand every machine we use. I mean,
Okay, so we're going to outlaw biochemistry? I don't understand all the organic molecules making up my hand.
Absolutely. Right. So outlawing biology doesn't really cut it. That's, from the point of view of where we're going ethically, that would be in the category of, force the universe to be boring, so to speak. And
I will say that my transhumanist politics are that law should maybe be boring. The government should maybe be boring. The part of the system that is telling you stuff you are supposed to be me, that's talking to me like a person and trying to give me orders, maybe I want that to be as simple as predictable.
I suspect that it is impossible for law to be computationally reducible. In the same way, to be a bit more technical, that if you are, doing math and you're saying, I've got these axioms, I want to have the integers and nothing but the integers. Right? We know that there's no finite set of axioms that gives you the integers and nothing but the integers.
I mean, if we're admitting second order of
without hypercomputation, you can't kind of swoop in. If we're just using sort of standard, we're just saying we've got these axioms: x plus y, equals y plus x, etc., etc., etc. Let us sculpt the world so with those axioms so that they allow only the integers and nothing but the integers. I claim that's very similar to saying let's have a system of laws that allows only these things to happen and not others.
I mean, that's not the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is to interact and is to do predictable things when I interact with it. Like the doctrine of, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, stare decisis in courts, where they try to repeat the previous court's decision. It's not that they think the previous court is as wise as possible. They're trying to be predictable to people who need to navigate the legal system. That's the foundational idea behind previous courts respecting past courts. It's not that the past court is optimal. It's that if the past court didn't really screw up, we'd like to just repeat its decision forever so that the system is more navigable to the people inside it.
I'm not going to take the bait on going down a rabbit hole here. There's a lot to say, but I really hope they come back to this radical claim that Yudkowsky made about about if that he thinks that AI will systematically converge on a scenario in which it kills all of us. And it's not that there's just a chance. It's that that's a high certainty outcome. And like clearly that's something that Stephen Wolfram disagrees with and could object to, but they went down some kind of tangent. So let's just keep watching and stay on subject here.
And my transhumanist politics says that, like maybe among the reasons why you don't want super intelligent laws own life and interact with other unpredictable people while predictably not getting killed.
Right. I think the point is, what you're saying is for us to lead our lives, it is, the way we lead our lives, we need some amount of predictability. If it wasn't the case, if every moment, space was distorted in all kinds of complicated ways, our little, bounded minds really wouldn't be able to do anything. We would be, we'd be, and I think, by the way, as a practical matter, as somebody who CEOs a tech company, I can say that, countries where there is a rule of law and where there is some predictability to what happens are ones where it is much easier to do business than countries where it's completely capricious and, depends on what somebody happens to say that day, so to speak. But so, yeah, I agree that my claim is that even, predictability only goes so far because the world will always throw it, things at you that have never happened before, and where, it is an inevitable feature of the computational irreducibility of the world that there will be things that happen that haven't happened before, that were unexpected, and then the law has to, for example, say something about those things, even though they didn't happen before.
In just a couple of months, it's going to be 2025. That's never happened before.
Indeed.
The stars have never taken on this exact position before.
That's true. And that's why we have models of things. That's why it is not, everything doesn't work just according to the cache, so to speak. It's, we make models so that we can figure out what to do in a situation that hasn't happened before. I think we should come back to how do we go from this, I think we agree that there's sort of unpredictable things that inevitably will, as soon as we allow any kind of computational irreducibility, we will have our systems do things that are unexpected. Now we have to go from unexpected to kill us.
Yeah, the things I'm worried about are not unexpected, like random noise. They're like chess moves that I can't predict exactly in advance, but that lead to a predictable end.
Okay, this is what I've been wanting him to talk about. I've been putting forth this idea that this is like random noise. I'm not saying it's actually random. I'm saying it's like random noise. And in order for us to make a claim about what it will do, we need to show how it is not random. So that is my way of saying that he needs to say what he's about to say. So hopefully he makes this case really well. And then that is where we can really have the discussion on if his claims stand up to scrutiny.
Humanity loses the chess game.
Okay, so let's understand that. So what you're saying is, independent of, so there are certain, I say inside some random AI system, the AI system might surprise us. It might suddenly, if it's a generating text, it might suddenly have the word delve in there, or the word stegosaurus in there, which we didn't expect.
It might even, or like the monitor you're looking at might suddenly devolve into random pixels, the most surprising possible outcome.
Yeah, right. Like your image on my screen is occasionally glitching and turning somewhat random. That's already happening, right? Okay. So and those unexpected things might be a big deal. It might be the case that I've got my, it's nighttime.
The amount the damage that random noise can do usually ends up being pretty limited, though. Crashing your car is one thing. Crashing your car into a senator who voted against OpenAI or something is quite a different thing. You need to give your car very exact instructions to get it to crash into a senator.
Right, but one of the things that sort of is a notable feature of science things that I've done is, you look at these computational systems and they are doing definite things. They're not just doing random things. It's not just saying, oh, you can't just, that's a mistake people made before, 40 years ago and stuff I was doing. They just sort of said, oh, it's just noise. We don't care about that. It's not just noise. A lot of that, that structure, which we happen to not understand very well, happens to be very important for what nature does, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not, we shouldn't just call it noise.
Yes, but even among things that aren't pure noise, it's still very rare. I could take a cellular automaton on the border between order and chaos that exhibits lots of interesting behavior in which further patterns can be found, feed it into the steering system of an electrical car, and it'll crash into a tree, but it won't crash into a senator. So the stuff that is purposeful, that does you a lot of damage, that's a very small fraction of the space. It has to be selected somehow. It's not just that it's order instead of chaos, it's a particular.
So, right, this is this is absolutely right. He's absolutely right. But what he's showing is he's kind of showing the burden that he has, because he's showing that what he's predicting is something that has a statistical significance outside of what the null hypothesis would be, which would be a random case where it's possible it could do something. It's just very unlikely. And there's still just as many possibilities for an AI to do as there is for a random machine to do. So he needs to show why that astronomically small subset of significantly bad things is something that the AI is going to do, as opposed to what the default assumption is that it would appear like, let's see the evidence.
If you selected for that part of the space, they would be things that will, it's like if you have a predator and a prey and you're operating under natural selection, the predator will gradually evolve to be more successful hunting the prey, for example.
Yeah.
And you're saying that for some reason, which I don't understand, which I want to understand.
Not literally inevitable, but beyond our current grasp to have not happen. Most superintelligences are like that. Some superintelligences are not like that. We don't have the technology to conjure up one of the few superintelligences that are not like that.
Okay, the natural world, for example, does not care about us.
Agreed.
The natural world does lots of things where, if you're put in, at the bottom of the ocean, you're put on the moon, whatever else, most of those places we don't survive, and the natural world is unrelenting in throwing things at us that are not good for us. Now, is that the type of risk that you're talking about, or is there something different?
It's more like how when a human builds a skyscraper, most of the ways we build skyscrapers are not good for ants to eat. I'm trying to figure out a good analogy. Ants have more trouble living inside of skyscrapers than inside. Not the same as termites managing to live inside trees. The AIs do stuff with the universe that is using up the matter, using up the energy. They could want a very broad variety of things that all lead to them using up the matter and the energy, and very few of those possible things they could be steering towards are best steered towards, maximally steered towards, by leaving a space for the humans to survive at all, let alone building the happy galaxies that are the primary table stakes.
Okay, but so I mean, when it comes to nature is just doing what it does. Humans manage to carve out a niche with respect to nature. Nature is rather unkind in general. It has all kinds of forest fires and hurricanes and all kinds of other
It's only sort of trying to kill you. It's like trying to evolve more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. It's not trying to kill you very hard.
Well, okay, yes.
The parts where it's systematically selecting for more dead humans are relatively small corners of the system and dealing with things like antibiotic
let's take
bacteria.
The natural world. I mean, the natural world, we know just by virtue of natural selection that the things of which there are more of them end up being the winning things, so to speak. So, for instance, viruses, might, as you say, evolve to be, it's like the winner wins, so to speak. The thing with more viruses wins.
Like whatever it is that generalizes purpose, generalizes passion, optimization, you could maybe call it. Planningness, steeringness. Natural selection has that thing. It has, non-random relationships between the action and the outcome.
Okay. But so now we've got AI, and we've got kind of the things it might do, and the things it might do as a result of perhaps these kind of unpredictable elements inside it that were not constrained by the way that we trained it or the way that we set up the technology. And now the question, what you're asserting is that many of the things that will happen are things which will kill us, basically. And
I'm
I
expecting
don't
it to
get
get
that.
better and better at planning, better and better at strategy, better and better at invention. In its world for humans, fun, consciousness, people caring about each other, that sort of thing. So I'm expecting the planning to be very non-random, but I'm expecting the place the destination to which it is steering to not fall within the deliberate control of the builders.
First of all, Eliezer, I completely agree with you that the planning inference horizon is very, very important for agency and intelligence. But one thing that we're talking about here, I think, a little bit is instrumental convergence. So
yes, this is something we've talked about in the last episodes, hoping that they're going to get to this. And just to quickly comment on what he's saying, really though, like implicit in what Yudkowsky just said is this assumption that there is a scarcity of atoms, or at least a scarcity of atoms within a specific important area of space. And he has been kind of hinting at this idea that the AI needs our atoms, and that is where the inherent conflict is going to arise between AI and humans. I think that is not a good theory. That I do not see why AI necessarily is going to hit such an immense scale that it can utilize all of the atoms, and why it's not going to hit any sort of plateaus. It's not going to have any self-destructive behavior. There is such an uninnumerable amount of things that AI can do. It may not even continue growing. We don't know. There's also humans, but like the fact that it's going to even be dealing in the realm of those atoms with humans, it would have to have scale to that point, and it would have to have had the capacity to do that, which is something that, yes, maybe it can beat humans, but does it have the actual capacity to scale to the point at which it needs the human's atoms? That's a different question, and that's a much harder thing to solve. Like let's say I'm the strongest person in the world, and I could beat anybody in a fight, and I have the best weapons. I could fight anybody, I could destroy anybody. Maybe I'm also politically gifted and I could conquer. This is going to be good. Let's talk about instrumental convergence.
There's this idea in a lot of traditional AGI X-risk discourse that super intelligent things will be super coherent. And that means they will have this canalization of their intermediate goals to do a particular thing, which means if they are super coherent, we can make reasonable assumptions that their sub-goals might be to gain power or to kill us all. But there are people who say that there seems to be a weird relationship between intelligence and coherence, such that the more intelligent you are, the lower your coherence. And what that means is there's this huge diversity of things that you do. And Stephen, you were saying in evolution, there are all of these sub niches. There are all of these little ways that you can traverse through the intelligence space. So if that is the way that intelligence is, how do we know for sure that it's going to lead to a bad outcome when it scales up?
If it's not coherence, it doesn't do stuff, and OpenAI throws it out and builds a AI that is, doing stubble AI, and they will build a more powerful.
If you assume the AI can scale to infinity, therefore, perhaps you could assume it would at some point try to gain power in order to achieve whatever its goal is. There's a lot of implicit ideas there of how that actually translates to everyone. It translates to everyone dying. But on an infinite time horizon with an infinitely scalable, perfect AI, yes, that's true. But there's a very big difference between an AI capable of killing all humans and an AI that is perfect in those ways that I mentioned. So this is just not only is, I think the argument probably falls apart if you pick apart each of those pieces, but just on a surface level, that just absolutely does not hold.
AI than that.
Right. So it's kind of an artificial selection. It's like you could do artificial selection on AIs, you can do artificial selection on viruses. You're saying that artificial selection that, where you select for a thing that is what is, you might imagine somebody might select for a thing. Somebody might decide there might be, a death wish cult which decides to build a very powerful AI.
I'm not concerned about them.
Okay.
I'm concerned about OpenAI. And
before we go more down this road of instrumental convergence, I also wanted to say, what are the odds that humans have reached the let's say the peak intelligence whereby we design our own demise, but things that are just slightly more intelligent than us do not. So, let's play this forward. We're humans. We are invented by all in one giant colossus, and we are a big intelligence cluster. Okay, so we have a certain level of intelligence. Let's call it 1,000, level 1,000 intelligence. Now, we create an AI that is, let's say, 2,000 level intelligence. So this AI is double the intelligence, or just, within the same order of magnitude, but more intelligent than we are. Now, this AI starts scaling. It starts self-improving. It starts doing all of this stuff. What are the odds that we were so intelligent that we could create this thing and do all this stuff, but we just weren't quite there to use up all the atoms? We were just too dumb. We could self-improve, we could grow, have higher population, have better technology, use AI, use Neuralink, all this stuff. We could do all that. We can self-improve. But the thing, and we have been, and we've been doing so exponentially, but we just didn't get to that threshold. It's not going to be self-destructive. So we created an AI that ended up in killing us and ended up in our own demise. But the AI that we created was not that stupid, and they were just intelligent enough to not lead to their own demise. So in other words, we weren't able to do infinite scaling of our intelligence. We weren't able to survive long enough to use up all the atoms. What is the odds that we're not able to do that? And yet, the AI that we create, which is only slightly more intelligent than us, what are the odds that that AI is able to? So there's this threshold of being too smart enough to create your own demise, but just slightly too dumb to know that you shouldn't have done it. We were here, and then we create an AI that's here, and this AI kills us, and it survives and actually kills us. What are the odds of that? It's pretty low, I'd say. And now you could say, well, maybe it doesn't have to. What are the odds that we're right here? This is the level of basically infinite scaling. Once you get this smart, you'll be able to scale forever because you got smart enough, and we just happen to be right here. What are the odds of that? I'd say that's very, very low. And now you might say, well, maybe the AI needs to be many orders of magnitude smarter than humans before we reach that kind of a level. Perhaps. That's when AI doom takes place. But now we're starting to talk about things that are much further in the future, much more uncertain, and we have a lot of time, and we can work with these friendly AIs that are not self-destructive, that are not basically too dumb to not create their own successors that will destroy them. We can work with them to solve the problem. We have time. So anyway, let's keep watching. The point is, though, I think it's a little bit ridiculous that we as an intelligent superorganism are basically not able to scale But yeah,
Learned about and
kind of the trophic levels or something, or the apex predator so far is OpenAI, and then okay, it's interesting to hear your trophic level analysis, so to speak, for AIs. But independent of that, you're saying your concept is.
I mean, I can delve into a recent example. Oh no, I've revealed myself to be a large language model.
Now we have to wonder. Right, go ahead.
So GPT 01, I think it was called. They're always inventing a new weird name instead of just using version numbers like sane people. So GPT 01 is a recent one that was trained harder to achieve goals rather than just imitate humans. They asked it to do various things, let it generate out different chains of thought for.
Yeah, just let me interject here that this is what I'm talking about. A chain of thought is actually something that can be communicated, just like human planning. Like we have this conscious plan, we create it, and now it's something that could be communicated. And it's basically, in the case of O1, this is steering the cognition. And we're able to see the different lines of reasoning that it goes down. This is similar to my model of consciousness.
Trying to do those things, and then told it to do, like shifted it to be more likely to output these successful chains of thought in retrospect, until it started outputting successful chains of thought in the future. If you now look at GPT-01, it seems to have a little bit more goal orientation, tenacity, the scary kind of property.
It's doing pathfinding. It's not just saying, let's add the next token, so to speak. It's saying, let's follow paths.
Creating the next token, as I currently understand it. It's just that sometimes the next token is like, okay, that's not going anywhere. Let's go down a different route.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it's just like if you're pathfinding on a graph, you could just say, I'm going to just, pick steps at random and just pick a particular path, or I can say, I'm going to go probe different paths. I'm going to try multiple paths. If one of those paths doesn't make it, I'm going to backtrack and I'm going to try a different path.
I think it is currently doing that in a linear serialized way, although I could be wrong because OpenAI doesn't one idea at a time, but sometimes says that's a terrible idea. Now I'm going to try a different idea.
Oh, sure. It doesn't happen to be running in parallel.
Yeah.
It's not running in parallel.
Which is an important difference, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could, this gets us into engineering details of AI architectures, which we could also talk about. And this is we're on a venue where that's what people talk about. But let's maybe not go there at this moment. But
people do sometimes say it's just predicting the next token, and what they don't realize is that covers a whole lot of territory, including going down lots of different branches.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have the outer harness be one that says try a branch, backtrack from the branch, and so on.
Yeah, it's to try this other thing. And
so far, predict the next token. In another case, it's saying, for example, I want to end up at this point. Let's try this path of predicting. If that doesn't work, the harness is going to say, throw out that set of things you did, try again. So it doesn't really matter whether it's external or internal.
I think it's but I don't know. I think that some people are imagining an external harness, and I think it matters in this case that the harness is internal, as I understand the architecture. That O1 itself is saying out loud, I'd better back up and try a different thing. There's not an outside system.
As I have O1.
Intelligences are doing it internally, but
this discussion of let's imagine it works. What's it going to do? Let's go.
One has more of the scary stuff. They were trying to test it to see how dangerous it was. And one of the things they tested it on was a capture the flag scenario where it was going to attack a target computer they'd set up and try to retrieve a particular piece of data on the computer. But owing to a configuration error the programmers had made, like one of the capture the flag targets just didn't boot up properly. So the system probe had a port exposed. So it probed that port, and instead of telling the system to just boot up the capture the flag destination, it told, and that it not only fixed the bug in the challenge, it just directly seized the goal. And that is new, and that is a result of training the system to have chains of thought that succeed rather than chains of thought that are human.
So here's one thing that I have, maybe changed as a result of spending, many decades, sort of actually exploring what computational systems do. And I was very surprised. I never expected that computational systems, these little, whatever they are, cellular automata, whatever it is, they do all kinds of things which to me look very clever. It's the fact that I many times, even the thing I was doing literally last night, I was like, I'm convinced it's not going to do this. And it managed to find, in fact, a shortcut for doing it, which I had not imagined.
These evolved systems or just like cellular automata flowing downhill?
These particular ones are evolved systems.
Carry on. So, I'm now less confused.
Yeah, right. So, but even in the other case, it's mostly exhaustive searches where it's got all kinds of things going on that seem incredibly clever to you that you never guessed. We found, in Wolfram language, we have tons of algorithms to capture the flag or whatever that wasn't one that I had imagined. I live that every day. That doesn't surprise me. And I feel like that, now should it scare me? Maybe, I need to understand your argument to know whether that should scare me, so to speak.
It depends on how powerful it is. A chess player it's like Stockfish 16 superhuman chess player. It doesn't keep like survival critical game boards you can play, or even just, all the game boards you can play. I suspect it's not that hard. No offense. The same applies to me.
I'm done. I don't care. Okay.
Well, the scientific discovery game. Clearly, to scare you, what we need to show you is the AI that finds a much more interesting cellular automaton than anyone you've ever seen before, using fewer computational resources than you use to search for the ones that you know about.
No, I've certainly thought about this scenario. In fact, there's some things that I'm about to work on where I have every intention of trying to see whether an AI can help me to figure out things that I would not be able to figure out by myself. So far, that's not, I think it has to be very well defined. In a sense, the computer experiments that I've done for the last 45 years are things where I am trying to get a computer to figure out things that I'm not able to figure out for myself. And so the question is, I don't know, that the particular things that I happen to be thinking about are things about economics and so on, which is a field that has lots of human input, which is much more difficult to just say, let me do an idealized computer experiment. I'm trying to understand, I'm wondering whether AIs can help me sort of disentangle what the essence of what's going on is there. Maybe will work, maybe won't.
I suspect if you ask ChatGPT to do anything really complicated, you will be disappointed by the present technology. It just keeps on improving.
Yes, story of my life has been trying to improve what computers can do, but it's also it's important to define the questions. But to your point, I'm still saying jump the shark. I'm thinking about sharks because they attack people and so on.
How we jumped,
saying the things that we currently consider sort of human only. This is an activity that we try to get to this point. We try to win this game. We try to make this science discovery, whatever else. The one feature of games that I think is confusing is that their objectives are very well defined. When it comes to science discoveries, the objectives are much less well defined. In other words, if you say, explain the universe, figure out the fundamental theory of physics, I think I made great progress on that. But many people might say, the things that you've figured out are not quite the questions we wanted to answer. So in other words, it's kind of, scientific discovery is a good example. Or for example, let's say, providing entertainment. What is success in providing entertainment? Success in chess is very well defined.
A bunch of the difficulty in getting AIs to produce images is that what is a good image? Sure. What is a good collection of pixels?
Right. But so my point is then, when you define the world in terms of playing games, then yes, the AI could win in terms of playing games. But my feeling is that sort of the path forward in everything is not as well defined as winning in games. That is,
it's not as well defined, but if you give me a chance, I can try to make it, only slightly worse defined. And it's achieving things in the outer real world. If, like the obvious thing would be if you told the AI to make money, There are lots and lots of ways to make money. The world is this enormous causal weave, and there are so many different pathways through which money flows, or different events that can happen, and then money lands in your bank account from the perspective of an AI. So,
All right. So, yeah, this is definitely something that we've talked about in the past. We've talked about how markets are, um, they are essentially a search engine, not a search engine, but they're running an optimization process. And go ahead and check out past content about that. I think just all the stuff I did last week, reacting to Andre Karpathy's Software 2. Would cover that content. That's very interesting. This is a pretty long debate, so I'm hopefully going to finish it up tomorrow. And yeah, I'm gonna stop it here today. But if you like this content, please follow me on X or subscribe on YouTube. I will see you guys tomorrow.